So this is Building Bridges, Forcing Hackers and Business to Hug It Out. I'm Andrew Hay. This is Chris Nickerson.
Of course. That's it.
Yeah. Any questions?
Bye-bye.
I'm a senior analyst at the 451 Group. Analyst, author, blogger, speaker.
I'm another asshole who has a glamour shop. I do security stuff.
Your picture is in this boy band, is mine.
I don't know, they look good together.
We need a third. We need a third in a
This is where
song.
the hugging starts.
So this is a good question. How did this talk come to be? So we started this as a discussion at ShmooCon. I don't even remember how we got into it, but we just started talking about it a bit. Oh no, it was the podcast meetup. Yeah, where
everything went out of control, but this was the one good thing that was like learned from it.
And it was probably the one time where Chris Nickerson was the voice of reason in a crowd of people yelling.
I tried.
We then talked about it at B-Sides Boston. It was actually during my talk that we just kind of had a side conversation going about it. It was like, oh, we should probably have a talk about this. We perfected this at B-Sides Vegas. By perfected, I mean our first successful dry run was in Las Vegas in July. And the main reason that this talk exists is because it really shouldn't have to exist. It seemed like very common sense to us that these two echelons of the business should really be able to talk about this and understand and get some sort of common ground. The industry obviously needs it because no one's doing it right. So we are going to talk about a handful of problems, and there's actually quite a bit. We might skip over some for time because we did run out of time last time because there were a lot of questions. We're going to talk about, from the trenches, what the hackers, and when we use the term hackers, we're talking all-encompassing security professionals, operational practitioners, white hat, gray hat hackers that are, even black hat hackers that are hired to do jobs for big business. Then our ideal ways to fix the problem. And we'll open it up to questions after that. There's generally a lot of questions during and after.
That's awesome.
My favorite picture of any slide ever. So these are some of the problems we're going to talk about. I won't just read them off. We'll go through them in greater detail. But these, you'll probably see some of these and think, okay, yeah, these are common. Some of them may not be as familiar to you as they were to us when we were brainstorming these. And so this entire presentation was done via IM. We created all of the concepts, the target slides via Instant Messenger, and then we just kind of sent it back and forth to fill out a lot of the content.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think it's one of those things that was so common that we kind of know that a lot of you go through the same problem. So it was like the first slide deck I ever made in like a period of hours, where it went from nothing, there was no other content from other slide decks, and it was just like complain about something, you would complain about it differently, and then we would both kind of go, oh yeah, here's how we want to present it, and then you would clean up my bad grammar, and we would move on. But I think it shows how much of a problem it is because we had such a similar kind of beef with what's going on that it made it really, really easy to put it on paper, which to me, anything that's easy to put on paper is probably a really big issue. Right? Opposed to the things where you have to like really, really work hard to communicate it to people. This was like, we kind of probably turned it into a book on what's going on and why, and it would kind of seem ridiculous at the end of the day that we even had to write all that stuff.
And actually it's the catalyst for a series of different talks that kind of follow this same theme, and gives us stuff to talk about at conferences for the next few years. with little to no thought. It's great. So, like last time, I'll go through, actually no, you did the trenches.
Yeah, so, does this seem like common? Like when you put your I'm inside hacker hat on, right? Is this like kind of the general view, right? Like the management doesn't care. Like they're a bunch of idiots who play golf all day and they're not going to realize and understand, like, I found Ode on our application and they need to fix it and all business needs to halt and everyone needs to just shut up and listen and I need to teach them how to fix it. Right? Because I'm here to work for the company and my job is to make sure we're secure, and when I find stuff that's not secure, I need to tell them, and then I can't get a hold of them because they're playing golf. Right? But does that seem fairly common, like this general mindset that people are sort of in?
I guess not.
At this, I'm out. All right, so not only do we have that, like the engineering people or the hackers, we're going to term it for this, we're also like the worst martyrs in the world, right? It's like, oh my God, I work all the time and no one ever listens to me and they blame me whenever stuff goes wrong. Whenever I find good stuff, they like don't care, right? It's funny, right? Like, we talk smack on management all day long and then get angry when they don't like give us our hug at the end of the day because we're busting our butt. And it seems that this is kind of common. Like most of the people that I work with in those roles, there's always some type of 2 a.m. angry bitch session where they're like, screw the management and these people are so and so and they don't do anything and I need to leave this and go somewhere where I get respect. Yet nothing's ever changed and they're all in the same boat.
The business. Now this may not necessarily reflect what the business thinks, but this is somewhat the view that the hackers think that business perceive of them as well. When I say hackers don't have a clue, I mean about the business risks and requirements. They need to care about the business because that's what's employing them, that's what's paying their paychecks. I am lying and hear me roar, do what I say because it's the way the business wants you to toe the line and just do it. I like the last bullet here, all they do is surf the internet and talk to their friends all day on Twitter IRC. I had a job like that, it was awesome.
Which is pretty much true.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as it sucks like we do it, we bring it on ourselves.
Yeah. The economic challenges are probably the most difficult pain point for, are you leaving too? The most difficult pain points to communicate down to the operational security staff, because frankly it's so high level that most people just don't care. They're very task oriented. They have an end goal for a particular project that they have to finish, and they don't really need to care about the ROI or that the stock jumped or dropped 2 points over the last week as a result of something.
They still get their nominal paycheck.
Yeah, they're not getting bonuses based on the performance of the business. Sometimes they are, not all that often. They don't listen when I tell them how dangerous it is. You go and run a pen test against the corporate web server and it takes it down. Well, the business is going to freak out if they hear you did that, because there's the potential for lost revenue, lost face. It's a marketing and PR nightmare if like a bank portal is down for extended periods of time. All it takes is one customer to complain that it's down, and if you don't handle that properly, then they go to the papers, and then the papers will call you, and it's just it just snowballs and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Business, they put in long hours too. It doesn't always seem to be parallel. It's a lot of different. Like when I was a manager, I'd work 12-hour days. I'd go home, I'd eat dinner, and then I'd log back into my laptop and I'd work for another 4 or 5 hours. But that's not something that my team or any of my peers would see, because I'd be sitting at home slaving away. The business has to answer the stakeholders, because that's who's paying the checks, and the money rolls downhill, as does shit. But you have to be accountable to the business stakeholders. Can anyone name the background graphic? Anyone?
That's got to be easy.
Hackers.
All right.
Took me forever to find that picture.
So we're going to go through some of the kind of specific challenges that highlight some of these things that either we project onto the management or management projects onto the hacker, or kind of those confusion points that exist, just purely to talk about these so that we can get it out in the open and people stop kind of lying about it, right? Because I think that's a lot of the time what we end up doing is, well, this is going on because of this, and we do our like kind of analytics, and it never gets spoken about, and because it never gets spoken about, it never can get fixed. So we want to kind of take some of these things and put sort of those views out there so that we can all together kind of figure out, all right, how do we get over all this stuff and get back to doing work? So, pure security versus business security, right? As a technology person, right, you end up kind of becoming a purist when you're in a business, right? If this server is vulnerable, it's vulnerable, and it needs to be fixed. And if it doesn't get fixed, we're going to get compromised, and we're going to lose the company, right? Like, we have this grandiose, like, oh my God, if one box gets hacked, we're done forever, right? And we sell that to the business, right? We sell that in our marketing material. We sell it in everything that we do. This is like the FUD concept, right? We do that in order to try and push out to people really how important it is. But for the most part, you know, that's what we want. We want every box to be secure. We don't want one box to be secure. It doesn't really matter to us that, oh, well, this runs here and this runs here. It's like, just fix it. Just, you have to do it, and it has to be secure. There's no wavering to that. Yeah, I mean, is there two in this one or just one?
Just one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's really what it's about, right? Is just that we need to have it be secure, and if it's not secure, we're not happy.
Now, FUD is one of those terms that's slowly creeping into business terminology because they're starting to understand what it means. And they will happily cry FUD if they think that what you're saying is A, going to cost too much money to remediate, or is something so outlandish that could never possibly happen to them, or they think is completely off base from where they are in their corporate structure and the business. A lot of security people in the business still hold that CIA triad as the be-all, end-all tome of what security is to the business. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but if you're going to wield something that's a triangle, you better have a lot of processes, policies, and procedures behind it to back it up. Typically, if anyone that's worked in big business knows that availability generally does trump integrity and confidentiality, because if the servers are up, then you have the potential for making money. If they're down, you're not going to make any money. If they're down because of a security risk, well, that's still seen as availability by most businesses. So, you reinstall that box or load the last backup and get it up and running. And while it's back up and running, you figure out what happened the last time that it got taken down. Not the best incident response plan, but it gets things back up like that. One of the hardest things for a business to understand is that security is expensive. Everyone knows that. The business knows that. But the business wants to be comforted that the act of employing security technologies and countermeasures isn't going to be detrimental to the bottom line. Because, again, we were talking about the stakeholders earlier. They have to answer those stakeholders. You go asking for $1 million for a global firewall refit project. They're going to say, well, we have firewalls that we bought 8 years ago. What are these new ones going to do that the old ones didn't do? Well, for one, they're going to be under maintenance. If they break down, we can replace them this time. There's all these justifications, and ultimately, it's going to come down to money. It's rarely ever technology. Like, ooh, this firewall has like extra stateful inspection. Well, yeah, that's worth $1 million. Let's go refit everything. Yeah, pull the trigger. And the budget, it's like, APT. Well, get the checkbook out. APTs are rampant in the wild. Let's spend some money on that. It just doesn't happen.
Well, so do you guys see kind of in there, right? The big piece of it is really on the hacker side or whatever we call it, we have no flexibility, right? It's secure or it's not. There's no dynamics to it, right? This has to have dynamics because the business has dynamics. But we are it's on or off secure, not secure, and we're pretty much going to always say nothing's secure because really in our industry nothing ever will be. So we have a job forever. But also, because we need to keep them in that 24/7 role, and they're like, yeah, that's what I hired you for. You do the 24/7 thing. I'll make sure the business runs and we get a paycheck.
There's so many extenuating circumstances that influence the decisions from the business that either are not passed down to the people that are reporting to the business, either because they don't feel the need to communicate that much information. They want to shield them from the mundane minutia, and they just want them to focus on their tasks. I don't know, maybe there should be more communication. It's like, here are our financial statements. Let's have a meeting. I'll go through what your purchases that you want to do are going to impact this bottom line for the next fiscal period. That'd be a fun meeting.
Yeah. All right. So, shell a box versus disruption or extra access, right? You can't validate it. Like, scanners don't work. You don't validate it until you actually get a shell in the box. Otherwise, it's all theoretical. And theoretical stuff doesn't work for most people who are kind of in that hacker mindset, right? So if it takes something down, good. Took it down. Now we know that people can take it down. We should fix that. Yeah. If it doesn't take it down and we get a shell, good. Well, now we know that that's there. We should fix that. But, all right, well, we got a shell on it. And then you show them, like, look, I got a shell on it. We should fix that. And they're like, what's the DOS box? Right? And you're like, no, it's not. What do you mean, what's the DOS box? Like, this is it. This is game over for the whole company.
Why don't you understand?
Yeah, like, how can you not get this? And they're like, why? We don't work in DOS, whatever. We don't even have this, and then you just get frustrated and like storm out because you haven't tied it to what's going on, and since you know what you're talking about, you assume that they do, and then all of a sudden there's like a huge conflict, right? Because you're angry because to you it's something that's so obvious, and to them it's completely irrelevant.
Again, back to the whole availability. You can't just go popping boxes to prove your point because it could potentially disrupt services and we could lose money. And then you won't get a paycheck anymore. I'll be out of a job and we'll be looking for a job together. And a lot of businesses, they hear the term vulnerability, they immediately think scanner because there's a lot of vulnerability management vendors out there that will pitch to people that it's easy to just passively detect or, from the surface, detect the vulnerabilities, and that should be sufficient for detecting the validity or the existence of a vulnerability. And the business thinks, well, yeah, that makes sense. So why can't you do this? Why do you need to exploit the box to show me that this works? Can't you just show me a report that says, yes, the port's open and therefore is vulnerable, and we need to patch it or shut that down? If an exploit is required to validate that test and it could impact the availability of the system or our SAP financials, and it's like, well, skip it. We can't really do that. We'll worry about it later.
And that drives us nuts, right? That why? Well, what do you mean skip it? It's there. It's ready. Let me take it.
That's the thing. It's just the business. We'll just assume that you're right and should be fine. And again, what's a shell? Has anyone ever heard this from the business that, okay, you compromised a box, but you did it from your desk, so that's not really...
it's not fair.
Yeah, it's not fair. You had inside information, you knew where the systems were, and, you're not playing by the rules. And then the guys go, the rules? Are you friggin' kidding me? Well, you're right, everyone out there plays in the rules. It's a big happy sandbox that everyone plays in the internet. And it's... there's this misconception that this firewall is this, protective barrier that's completely impenetrable. Yeah. 30 arms and swords, and if you're on the inside, okay, yeah, well, you can compromise that box and show that to me, but Joe Hacker out on the internet can't get that far in because, we've got this 8-year-old firewall that we bought, and that's why we bought it 8 years ago.
All right. completeness, right? Most of the time, from the tester hacker perspective, it's I have to test all of it, right? Why does PCI suck? Well, it only tests 5% of your environment, maybe, and even then, you work over and over and over again to whittle 5% to like 1%, so that you can just kind of avoid all the auditors. And then all of us testers are like, well, the rest of your company is completely screwed forever. So we need to test absolutely everything so we know and can wrap our arms around how messed up is it really, right? Sample sets or whatever, it's a sample set. Who knows? Maybe I picked the wrong sample set and these 15 boxes are the ones that have been patched, and then the other 30 boxes that are not part of my test that you scope out of scope on purpose because you know I can hack them. You know, those are just out on the side. And then we get mad of like, oh, how come you only gave me the good stuff to test? Let me test everything. Let me figure out the test. You just sit in the back and do your business and grab stuff.
Like,
yeah, right? So, and we can't just test what you want to test. We have to test everything. Not just necessarily the number of boxes, but we have to test it from the network, we have to test the app, we have to do all sorts of really nasty stuff. We have to be able to, test every level. We need to test your people. We need to be able to really get this multi-dimensional view of how bad is it. Oh, yeah, the last one. Hold on, go back one. And that. The people you brought in suck, let me do it.
which every business likes to hear. Like, oh, we threw money down the toilet. Thanks.
Good
Thanks
job.
for calling me out.
Just point and laugh at them. They're idiots. They just scanned.
From the business side, though, most of these are all project-oriented, or there's a particular cost center associated with the task at hand, and it's very fixed cost, especially if you're bringing in consultants externally. There's very little wiggle room because, for the most part, it was really hard to get that section of budget put aside for this project in the first place, and now you're asking for more money to do more testing. So the business says, I have X amount of dollars, what can I get for this? Or, you gave me the proposal, we'll take option B, which is kind of the mid-range test, doesn't test everything, but is within our budget, and stick to those parameters. That is the depth to which you can test. You do not exceed that. Your orders are just for that.
Testing everything is $100 grand. We have 10. Show us what we get, and we'll pick that. Right?
So the only thing in scope, this is a good one. The only thing in scope are the machines holding, your compliance reg of choice or your personally identifiable information. So that's the only thing you care of. I don't know how much people know about PCI, but one thing I've learned about PCI as things go on is if your segments aren't properly defined, then everything's in scope. So that could really expand your testing requirements. So if it's a test or an audit for PII or PCI related compliance, well, you're going to have a lot of things in scope that also need to be testing. Not penetration testing, but testing nonetheless. Web app test or code review. Another PCI thing. This is one of the tenets of PCI. You can have, if you can prove code review, or you have a web application firewall, then they're equally as good. Well, I guess, it's all about your comfort level, really. I'm a firm believer of proper code review and proper software development life cycles and testing. Web app firewall does help mitigate some of the low-hanging fruit, just like a web app test. I can go in and do a code review, which is probably going to be, which will be more thorough than just an external web app test, because you're going to be doing that test as well.
But I think the point in that is as a business, we're instructed to do certain things like PCI, and when management reviews that and says it says web app test or code review or WAF, we bought a WAF, we're done. Check. And then you come back to them and you're like, no, you're not done, you're vulnerable, this and this. They go, no, we are done. This says by this, or this, we took option 3, we are done. And empirically, they're right. They are done with their objective. So we have to, kind of get a better understanding that they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. Even though we don't agree that it's right or anything else. I mean, somebody said, buy one of these 3 things, they bought one of the 3 things, we kind of have to shut up about it.
And neither of us are PCI fanboys, but
I hate it.
They are complying with what the industry is saying they need to do. And as practitioners, you kind of have to grin and bear it. You can work other inroads to try and get them to do the code review, but it may be on your own time just to prove a point. You're probably not going to get funding for a project to just go off and do that because you already have this compensating control protecting against this. We have a slide just on compliance, so we're probably going to skip over that one pretty quick.
Have you dealt with this? Right? We're like, there is no scope, there's no spoon, there's no inside, there's no outside. Like, you just let me go whoop ass. That's what I do, right? And I'll go get it all. And when you tell a business that, right, who's used to operating in a way that they have deliverables that they pay for, and those deliverables have to match a scope. When you say there is no scope, they go, then there is no money, right? Because it's a transaction. No matter what, even if you work for the inside of the company, you still have to provide some type of SLA. But we're like, no, hell no, there's no scope. Attackers aren't gonna, God, I come into it all the time. Like, they're not weekly testing, and it's, well, you can only attack during this time and this time on Wednesday. And we're like, what do you mean? Did you just call all the hackers the road and be like, yo, you can only attack us during this time? That's ridiculous.
It's the only time we're accepting requests.
Right, that's it. And I don't care what's on it. I don't care where PCI data lives. I don't care about any of that stuff. Like, I'm gonna own all your stuff, and we're gonna figure it out from there. Oh, the FC out of scope one, I love that. Just as a side note, like, oh, well, if you attack our people, you're cheating. Why? They have assets. Like, it's vulnerable.
They are assets.
Yeah, I can. Did you say assets or assets? Assets. But yeah,
there is a business reason why they do that. Hour limiting, though, even though I think it's retarded. And that's their change control time, right? Like, when they have down servers that aren't,
They've predetermined that it's justified that anything could go down from this window.
Right.
So as a manager, you have to make that business decision, okay, this potentially damaging activity has to happen during a time when we can withstand the potential loss of whatever.
Right.
It's still not reality, but most times they don't deal in reality, they deal in costs.
Yeah. And I think it's on us to understand that when we're bitching and complaining about it, right? We have to understand that the business is running and not everything is about us or security or whatever cool random crap that we learned at a conference.
Right? You can't bitch them.
No, huh?
You should do it constructively, though. Rules of engagement, non-negotiable. As outlined in the scoping document, this is what you adhere to. You do not do anything more. Because the moment you start scope creeping, I start freaking out that it's going to start costing me money. And it could also be damaging to the other servers that you're going to be testing that I haven't informed the senior management team are going to be tested.
Like, could you imagine that as a plastic surgeon? Like, scope creep? Like, I'm going in to have this fixed, and you come out and they're like, well, I saw that there were these problems, so I fixed those as well. And you're like, I don't want these. Like, no.
But the new chandelier. Scope creep doesn't always benefit the business. It's very rare that scope creep does benefit the business because that manager or the reporting structure is on the hook for sending it up the chain and explaining, why it had to go into a far deeper and broader scope than was originally agreed upon. They brief the senior management team saying, okay, we're having a test. They're not going to give details. They'll say, we're going to be testing these servers based on what we discussed previous meeting. It should be done within 2 weeks. We'll reconvene then with results and I'll tell you what we discovered. And they're like, great. If you go to that meeting 2 weeks later and say, oh yeah, by the way, we also tested these 10 servers, it cost us another 10 grand, but I thought it was a really good idea, or my tester thought it was a really good idea that we expand that, they're gonna say, wait. So that's $10,000 extra you spent on servers that you didn't tell us you were gonna be testing. Like, they're gonna lose it.
You increase their risk by $1 million. And that's where I think the other side doesn't usually understand is it's not just about the money that they're spending and the hours of work testing. It's we've accepted that if this stuff goes down while they're testing it, we can lose Y amount of money. But as soon as you go outside of that, that bucket of money that they could lose is now something that they haven't anticipated, and you've now really caused them a significant problem in their business mathematics. Right, is yes, I know we need to test this and you can try and make the case for it all day long, but at the end of the day, the business is only going to accept what the business can accept. And as soon as you go outside of that, you force them into an area that's very uncomfortable.
And a good manager or project leader should set that out. If you come to them saying, okay, well, we need the scope increase, then, well, let's focus on this for now. I will go to the senior management team and see if we can do a secondary project and scope this out for either, tuck it in at the end of it or schedule something a couple weeks down the road, but don't just jump into it and do it. Let me at least talk about it and prepare them for it. It's not one of those situations that you can beg for forgiveness after you've done it. Like, that's not going to fly. That's a career limiting move for everyone along the chain. Everyone that you talk all the way up, they're going to cringe when they hear what you did. And as soon as it gets to the top, as soon as the CFO finds out, he's going to crap all over you, and that's going to roll downhill.
I'm going quickly on these.
Yeah.
Because you should be, I think a lot of you feel this and know this, right? Downtime versus you need to patch it, right? I don't care. It needs to be fixed. So I don't care about if you can't have it down right now, whatever, it's just a website, people will come back. We need to patch it so we don't get on. That's it.
Of course, that's where the money comes into play. If our core banking server is down for any period of time, we have the potential for losing money, customers. If we have a network firewall and desktop AV, that should be enough. Well, we don't need to patch that. We're good. That's covered
because
off.
The marketing material told us we don't. It stops on it.
Yeah. So we're stopping network threats and we're stopping endpoint threats. So we are perfectly fine. The attacker's on the outside and they can't breach our 8-year-old firewalls, so we don't really need to patch these systems right now. We can hold off for, let's say, 6 months until we have a major service window that we can bring the server down and patch.
And since the attackers are on the outside, what do we need to worry about?
Yeah. We have a compromising control already deployed.
Anyone in software development? You've probably gone through this, right? Like, I know this is buggy. I know that there's problems in it. I know that as soon as you push this out to production, that we're going to get owned this way. I know it. I've seen it. I've given all of the developers notes on how to fix it, and they came back and said, we can't do that because it's going to take a week. Well, it's just a week. Fix it.
Just like that.
That's it, right? That's what we do.
So I used to be a development manager for a decent size enterprise development company, and I would receive marching orders. I reported to the VP of marketing, which is not a good report for product manager and software engineering manager, because you were dictated by their product release schedules and sales commitments. You need to win a deal, so it's the kind of thing where you are forced to decide if you're going to push the schedule, lose $1 million contract, or if you're going to let that bug go out that's potentially exploitable, and win $1 million for the short term. We'll fix it later.
Yeah, like as a business, you need to make the money, and if that feature release is going to stop the money from coming in, or the bug fix is going to stop the money from coming in, it's a pretty easy decision. Tell a security person who's crying to sit in their corner and cry and not talk to me while I go make money.
I have verbally whipped my software engineers that were reporting to me. because there was an $8 million deal on the line. And they were working 18, 20 hours to get the pieces that they were developing done so that we could win the contract. So I know they cut corners. I'm not a developer, but I knew full well that they were tired. They were developing it as fast as they could to meet this deadline, and corners were cut. After the fact, when it went into the field, things broke, like they inevitably do when proper processes aren't followed. So it just blew up in our faces. We got the deal, and that, for the business, that's really what mattered.
Well, and you know, in the business, with good intent, says, well, when we get the money, we'll have extra money to put into the development process and fix the bug that you're talking about. Now, does it actually happen? No, because you have to do business the next day as well. But
if we can fit it into a $3 release, we're fine.
Right. Compromise disclosure versus complete and utter devastation, right? We're like, oh, we got hacked, we should tell people, right? It's our good person inside of us, right? Well, we should tell everybody and let them know that all their financials have been compromised because we got owned. Really? Should we? But we have to. We have to tell them, right? Because if our business doesn't tell them, you guys are the unethical pricks. And you point back up at your management chain. And you go, it's your fault. You didn't do all these other things that I've been crying about. And now we got owned, and you have to own up to that, so you have to tell our customers.
The problem is, when you tell the customers, you have the potential for losing them. You know, it could jeopardize current, future business. You know, you are opening yourself up to all sorts of criticism from your competitors, your customers, and that could be devastating to the business. You know, a lot of people try to bury as much of this as they can and disclose compromises if they're mandated by government, federal agencies to do so, but they will try and bury it under the rug as far down as they can just so that no one finds out about this bad press. This one's easy.
Compliance is not security. Compliance is dumb.
You've all had a revelation today.
I don't need to say a whole lot more from the hacker perspective of just compliance is ridiculous because it doesn't do anything. At least that's the mindset.
It's, you know, sometimes compliance is good enough for the business. You know, they have marching orders, certain amount of budget, direction from up top to tell them that, you know, we are going to be fined if we don't implement these checkboxes. So they're given their sheets and they start checking things off with the limited budget they have. And they'll get the cheapest solution to check off that budget if it makes them a good manager. Not the best solution, but sometimes it's good enough for the business.
Well, and it's a target to follow, right? It's we have a guideline, we can follow it, we can check it off, we can show our progress, we can have metrics, versus you need to secure everything. What's the scope? Everything. What do we need to do? Everything. What do you need to test? Everything. Fix everything.
What's going to cost? A lot.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Hey, at the end. So Chris found these pictures. So business, you know, very structured and organized. 10 minutes, jeez. Hackers, you know, blow through all the crayons, get it done, kill it, make it work, make it beg for mercy, report it, you're good, fix it, we're fine. And what we need is sort of a mesh of the two. You know, we need this organized chaos into something beautiful.
Something beautiful. Like a bag blowing in the wind.
Yeah.
It's so good.
That's great.
But, you know, I think that the business takeaway from some of these things just coming out, right? Because I don't think we talked about anything like reveling, right? There's nothing that you guys probably don't already know.
Common sense.
But it's just putting it out there so that we can do something with it. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of things that the business needs to understand, like, look, these people are really intelligent. And, you know, as a business, we make good hires, so our employees are going to be good. So we can let them in on some things that may not be part of their job to help them learn why their job is their job. And I think that just like that conversation, right? We're going to have a structured meeting to go over the financials, and we're going to tailor parts of that meeting to you to show you how your decision is affecting the bottom line of the entire company. And it's not just about security today. It's about how you play into this business. and give some of those hackers kind of that moral and ethical ownership, so that they understand and they're educated in a way to know that every move that they make has the ability to, topple financial issues, and it's not necessarily just the root on the box that they can get. It may be that they're moaning about one project is now causing such a problem in the business that they're losing money just because they decided to that day. And I think, all of that kind of ties in that picture, right? Is you're one of the people in the business, it's a mountain that's moving, and from up close it looks like it's going really fast, but from far away it looks like it's hardly moving. And when you take your secure everything view, you're way far away and can't really see how fast things are moving and what the impetus is to actually do it.
And business needs to know that security is expensive, so plan accordingly. When you do those budget meetings, you need to provide ample buffer for this wiggle room for scope creep and additional projects as they come up, which not all businesses do. Now, we're not saying that every hacker has to go out and get an MBA, because that might make this communication thing a little bit more on par, but if you're not using it all the time, you're really not going to gain a lot of value from it.
Yeah, but then we're just going to go and be like, I know this is how the business operates, and here's the flaw in how they operate, so I can exploit this and get my everything this way.
Yeah. It actually makes you a better social engineer too.
Right.
But you need to understand how to speak to executives, because they're two different breeds. Everyone always jokes that when a manager goes away to training for some sort of management training, they come back with this mythical book of business buzzwords that does nothing but piss everyone off. And when they came back from training, they started.
It's we had a terms book.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, we had a terms book that everyone in the company got, and they were the terms that everyone uses, and it was it was actually in the buzzword book.
Paradigms. Yeah. Shift paradigms outside of the box for cutting edge executive lingo. It was great. If you can communicate upwards and business has to communicate downwards in a common, agreed upon nomenclature, then the communication barriers will be blown away. If you start talking about shifting paradigms, when someone says that to me, my eyes roll back and I start convulsing. But if, like Chris was saying, if you show some executive a shell, they're going to be like, oh, cool. Good for you. Yeah, back to work. So you need to tell them, what this actually means and put it in lingo that you can or that they can consume. Now, it's not dumbing it down to the point of well, this is a box that if I go in here and I type blah, 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 it's going to go boom. Because you're not going to get the respect. They're not going to ask you to do anything for them ever again, and they'll probably fire you.
So, I think that when we put it on us as the hacker side or tech side to understand language and to make sure that our approach is right, it will get more traction. When the business is able to kind of see the sort of addiction that we have to that, and how we can be better educated to communicate to them. I mean, I don't know you're speaking this crazy language, so teach me what the language is, and then maybe I can speak it. But I think both of us need to have kind of tolerance for the education process, and I think that's one of the big things that lacks right now, is that we don't have that tolerance. And we need to start kind of, the stupid walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. We need to kind of understand what's going on both sides and have that tolerance so that we can create some type of creative interaction, between each other instead of having it always be adversarial. Because at the end of the day, we're on the same side, right? I want the business to be safe. They want the business to be safe. Our methods are completely different, but we have the same common goal. So why is it such a problem? Why do we have to fight about it at the same time when we're in violent agreement?
It's a bifurcating synergistic paradigm.
I will throw a chair at you.
So, how have you guys reached out or reached up or reached down to the disparate groups in the organization.
Do you have these problems? Is this exist or is it just for us?
It's an industry problem.
Yeah.
Okay. So how have you? I mean, you've had the problem before. How have you dealt with the problem?
So I mean, part of
Ignore it.
when you talk about scope and things like that, the one thing that from the attack side that we're generally not really good at is prioritizing. So, you say, okay, well, what's in scope, and we just want to look at PCI stuff. You look at the business. What does the business really care about?
Yeah.
What are the assets they need to protect, and what are the controls like around those? And who cares about some other stuff that you're going to be able to get through or get shell in that box? It doesn't matter because it doesn't have access to any important data, any assets, things like that. It's just off to the side.
And that's like a perfect example of speaking in their terms, right? Is if they can teach you about the business, you can now go, this is why owning this box is really important, and they go, oh, that's the box that has this software that I log in every day, and when I go to this URL, you mean that one? You're like, yeah. And then you show them a screenshot of you changing the general ledger to the CFO, and they shit their pants instantly, and they're like, I get that, we need to fix that, that's messed up.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we're talking about communicating in their language. It's not just like dumbing it down or talking business.
Right.
Like, you don't need to explain what that shell on a box means. Again, it's what access do you have now based on that, and how can you leverage it to go further? Beyond that, what are you getting access?
Yeah.
That's
Another good
really need to
example.
understand so it's prioritizing things like that. Risk management is another thing as well that we talk about, and that's part of the business speak as well. But yeah,
We don't talk in theoreticals.
Whatever.
Kind of on that same line, if you're reporting vulnerabilities to the senior management team, they don't care that the vulnerability trend is increasing. They want to see that the resolution or the patches being applied are reducing the vulnerabilities. So if you could approach from here's how we're making things better, as opposed to, oh, everything's horrible. Look, see? Look how bad this is. You should fix that. That doesn't help the business at all.
I think hackers can understand as well that just because of vulnerability in the system doesn't necessarily automatically take away from the problem.
Right.
It's kind of like car safety. If you're in a car without a safety belt on, it doesn't mean you're going to die. Right. You will die. You have a higher risk of dying if you crash.
Yeah.
You also get caught by the police without affecting you've got a compliance problem. So, yeah, I think people need to understand and communicate with the business.
And probably not be so dramatic.
Yeah, exactly. The world is not going to end.
Yeah.
I think the point about risk management, I think people need to learn to talk about impact, and that's a little different than vulnerability. I mean, impact could be to a business process, maybe not just to an asset. So if bad guys are good at finding the value to exploit, I would think that security needs to start talking about the value to protect. And, I understand enough of the technical stuff to follow you, but if I were the business guy, I would probably extend you a basic level of trust that you know what you're talking about. But tell me about the impact.
Yeah.
Am I looking at losing a $200 million a day processing system?
Or is it
That's what matters. We all get our paychecks.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. That's why we work, right?
Yeah.
So I don't even think it's so much of learning the language of return on investment or net present value or internal rate of return or a bunch of stuff that people in this room may or may not work with every day. But impact, you can understand that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so I know we have to go, but my final request to all of you is to explain and think and throw around ideas about how we fix this, because this is, in my opinion, one of the worst problems we have. Right? As an industry, our industry sucks at communication. Yet we're a communication industry. It's ridiculous. And so I want to know from you guys, how do speakers help promote fixing this? How do people who attend conferences promote fixing this? How do we promote it at work? How do we do it in public? How do we do it wherever? Like, I want ideas so that if there's good ones I can follow or support or be part of, right? Because I want it to get fixed. So I really would love to hear more ideas from people on where it happens, what we can do with it, how we can fix it, or how we can at least get it out there so it starts to get addressed, because it's the big giant elephant in the corner of the room that all of us know about, but no one says anything about. So, yeah, I mean, thank you guys. I just, please talk about it and try and fix this ridiculous problem we have.
But we gotta go.